a lot of these narratives that people have, they don't feel connected. They do feel a sense of emptiness. And I get a sense from a lot of the people that I talk to of them putting themselves in a victim role in that regard as well.
Well, I think this lack of connection is a big theme, especially now. And, I should just give this some context to say that in Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, I follow the stories of four seemingly very different people that I see in therapy. But there's a fifth patient in the book, and that is me,
Right.
as I go through therapy with my own therapist. And I did that because I say at the beginning of the book that my greatest credential is that I'm a card carrying member of the human race, that I know what it's like to be a person in the world. And I didn't want to be the expert up on high because I truly believe, especially as all these years as a therapist, I've seen that we are all more the same than we are different. And so I think that when people are struggling with something, whatever their issue is, there are real issues that they're struggling with, very kind of discrete issues. But underneath it is often this sense of not enough connection. How are their lives peopled? And are those relationships nourishing them? So they might have a lot of people in their lives, but they might not be nourishing because they're operating on a superficial level, or they're having a lot of difficulty with getting along, or they aren't opening up, they're not being vulnerable. So there are a lot of reasons that we feel disconnected. And I think part of it has to do with we feel like whatever we're going through is that we're alone in it. And we don't talk about our emotional health as much as we need to, in the sense that if something happens to you physically, like let's say that you fall down and break your arm or something. We're going to go to the doctor for that. And we're not going to compare it to something and say, well, it's not like I have whatever it is, stage 4 cancer or whatever, something that you think is more severe than that. With our emotional health, we say, yeah, I don't know, I'm feeling like disconnected, or I'm feeling kind of sad, or I just, something's off. But, I have a roof over my head and food on the table, so it's okay. I'm not going to get help for that. We don't have this hierarchy of pain with our physical health. We get help, but with our emotional health, we do. So if you're having chest pain, you're probably going to go see a cardiologist before you have a heart attack. If you're having emotional pain, the people who come to my office are usually having an emotional heart attack. They didn't come when they were just having the equivalent of the chest pain. And now, first of all, it's harder to treat because now you're like, it's really gotten bad. But secondly, you suffered unnecessarily for a long time when you didn't need to. So I think part of the disconnection is that we don't realize how important it is to tend to our emotional health, not when it gets really bad, but to make that a part of our lives, to make that a priority.
Yeah, and I think we have to own that because one of the things that I think we're really deficient in society wise is we don't do anything in the educational system to teach kids to recognize red flags in their mental health. We don't teach them what you're feeling might be anxiety or depression or some other mental health anomaly. We don't teach them what that is. We don't teach them how to recognize it. We don't teach them what the resources are. We don't teach them how to avoid the stigmas associated with that. And there's a counselor in every school, but they just are pretty passive. They sit there and wait for somebody to come knock on their door. They're not proactive in most cases. And there is a stigma. If you're seen going into the counselor's office, you're like, well, what's wrong with this person? And they're kind of ashamed of it. I think we have to do a better job of saying, look, this is something that you need to learn about and recognize. It's been a long time since I've been in private practice, and I so admire those people that do it. When I was in private practice, one of my most eye-opening experiences was that I had people that never knew they were depressed until they weren't. I had people that came in and they didn't come in because they were depressed. They came in because of a marriage or their kid was on drugs or something was going on. And they never knew that they had depression until it lifted and they began to say, oh, wow, the sky is blue. there are people around that care about me and that I care about, and I have energy for my job and my family. And all of a sudden they said, "What's going on?" They had lived years being depressed and never knew it, and said, "Doc, what's happened here? What's going on?" How many people are living with depression and don't even know it because they don't see the red flags and have not labeled it?
Yeah, I'm just nodding because that's exactly what I see in my practice. Is so many times people do not know how to identify what's going on with them. And if they've been living with depression for most of their lives, they just think that's life. That's normal. They don't know that there's something different. They think, "Oh yeah, the problem is that I keep arguing with my husband." They don't know I'm also depressed. And so, and anxiety. Sometimes people do not know that they have severe anxiety that is really getting in the way of their functioning in a way that they finally see when the anxiety is dealt with. I think when you talk about that kid going into the counselor's office at school, we see that as a sign of weakness, but really it's a sign of strength. That kid is saying, "I want to get help for this." So whenever somebody admits that they need help, that it takes so much courage, so much bravery. And I wish that in our culture, and I think it's changing, but it has so much farther to go, that we could see that when somebody wants to do something for their emotional health, that person is extremely strong. They're not weak, they're strong.
Exactly. Just admitting it to themselves and not worrying about people judging. I saw the other end of the continuum too. I'm a strong believer that it's not what happens in our life that upsets us, it's violation of our expectancies of what's happening in life. If you get married and you think, "Okay, my spouse is going to meet me every day at 5:30 at the door naked with a martini," then you get married and that doesn't happen. What happens is you're having to share time, space, division of labor, money. One of you gets the flu, you're mopping up vomit, all of these things that actually are just normal. That's just part of it. But if you had an unrealistic expectation and that happens, then you go, "Oh my God, this is horrible. We've had a fight. We must not be in love." Then they're all upset. But if you have a couple that expected, "Hey, we're going to merge two lives into one. We're going to have to share time and space and money. We're going to have friction merging our lives. That's just part of it." And then it happens. They go, "Oh, yeah, well, that's pretty much what I expected." And so I roll right through it. I think it's that it's not what happens. It's if you have an unrealistic expectation and it gets violated, then people start panicking and having anxiety. And again, we don't teach people what to expect. We don't tell them what's natural or normal. If we did that, I think we would have much better across the board mental health if we would just spend some time doing that. But I don't know why we don't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think where we learn that is we learn that from media. We learn that from movies, which of course are not realistic. We learn that from social media, where people are, of course, not posting about the fight that they had with their husband the day before. That's not what they're putting on Instagram. So, I think then we start to feel very alone, like, wow, something must be wrong with my marriage, or something must be wrong with my kid if this is what's happening. And people just don't know and they don't talk about it, so they don't find out.
I love the way you describe this, and it's why people are resistant to change, why they will stick with what they've got instead of reaching for something more, something better, something different. Why do you think we are so married to what we have instead of what we might really want or need?
I see this so much in my practice, and you can see it. There's a person in my book that I write about, who's, keeps dating people who are not meeting her needs and who are not people that the kind of person she wants to be with. And she keeps kind of repeating something from her childhood, but is unaware that that's what she's doing with how she was treated when she was younger. And she knows she needs to change, but so often we don't make change because when whatever the change is going to involve loss of the familiar. Even if the familiar is miserable, at least it's the devil you know. And so often we are afraid of uncertainty. Humans don't do well with uncertainty. And so with change comes loss. You lose what's familiar to you. You lose what feels like home to you, even if home is not a positive experience for you. And you have to go do something different. And that can scare a lot of people. The other thing about change is people think, like when you think about New Year's resolutions, people think, oh, I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to eat healthier, whatever their New Year's resolution is. Or I'm going to switch jobs. I'm going to get out of this bad relationship. And the reason that New Year's resolutions often fail is because there are so many steps to change that people don't realize. There are actually many steps. And it starts with pre-contemplation, where you don't even know you're thinking about making the change. Then there's contemplation, where you're thinking about it, but you're not ready to do it. Then there's preparation, where you're kind of preparing, you're getting ready, you're kind of logistically getting ready to do it. And then there's action, where you're making the change. And then there's the last step, which is the most important. People think that once you take action and you make the change, that you're done. No, now you've just begun. The real important step in change is maintenance, which is how do you maintain the change? And that doesn't mean that you don't slip back. It doesn't mean that, oh, you went off your eating plan, or you called that person at 3 a.m. that you said you vowed you would never call. It means that when you slip back, you get right back on the program the next day. And you have to know, just like you were talking about expectations, that in marriage, sometimes people will fight. When you're in maintenance, sometimes you will slip back. But the more that you can be compassionate with yourself and not beat yourself up and say, you know what, I slipped back, but I'm going to go back tomorrow, and I'm human and that's what happened. The less you're going to slip back until the new way of life becomes a habit and it becomes comfortable and it no longer feels scary and unfamiliar. And that's when you've made the change.